Sallynee. It's really nice to have you on my show.
Hi, Mika. Thanks for having me.
I'm Mika Putterman, founder and artistic director of Autour de la Flute, a chamber group featuring the historical flute. And today is an episode of another Autour de la Flute, but this flute. We are meeting around a glass of champagne, and I'm happy to welcome my guest, Sallynee, violinist, Baroque violinist, and co-founder and executive director of Infusion Baroque, a chamber group based here in Montreal as well. And I think we can pop open our drink.
Excellent.
Together. Now,
cheers.
I like
it.
Cheers. So, Sallynee, you're American. You're from Chicago. Yes. Montreal, Chicago, they're not such different. There's this resemblance there. You can't, you're coming from great weather to horrible weather. You're coming from horrible weather.
Before I started my master's degree in the States, I was living in Bangkok, Thailand for 10 years. And I have to say that was a shock coming from tropical weather back to the States. And my first winter back in North America was terrible. It was really, really shocking.
You become so I saw you were on another podcast. I didn't listen to it yet, but you're podcasting all over the place. You're also speaking a lot about race. I mean, you and I talked about that recently because it's a subject too that's been on my mind. I mean, hopefully it's been on a lot of people's minds recently. Complex for me because I'm in my hometown, but I'm a non-visible minority. It feels like invisible because as soon as I open my mouth, you know what I am. I mean, it's a non-visible minority, but I am definitely sensitive to the issue. And
it's a topic that I think everyone should think about, and everyone's thoughts or opinions on it continue to evolve. And I think that a lot of one thing, the most important thing is that we just have to be respectful of that. Everyone's experience with this issue of race is going to be different. I'm in my early 40s now, and I've like we've talked about, I've lived in a few different places, and my identity as an Asian American has changed, throughout the course of my lifetime. And I think the thing that has maybe bothered me the most about this issue is that people don't recognize that everyone has an experience. Anybody who is a visible minority, we have a problem. We have a problem of discrimination, of white supremacy. And that is something that has to be tackled maybe at a macro level. And then you have to just go in and listen to individual stories. And I think, maybe if I were to say something very, very general about my experience throughout the course of my life, but also maybe in the past several months, is that I think the best thing to do is just to listen to people, give them the space to talk, to share. Am I the only one? If I'm the only one, is this worth talking about? What's been really, I think, therapeutic for me is learning that I'm not the only one that has certain, who's had certain experiences or who feels a certain way about these issues of race. So, yeah, I mean, it's funny because yes, while it's a double-edged sword. I really appreciated the opportunities that I've had to speak out on this topic, and I appreciate people asking me how I feel. And then on the flip side, once in 6 months, are people still going to be interested in talking to me? And what about me as a musician as opposed to as a person of color?
Of course, that's the hard part. And also, it's like a Russian doll, and there's so many pockets and layers, and it's so complex because there's levels, like you mentioned, a macro level, but there's the level of what it means in the world, what it means in North America, what it means in Quebec, what it means in Montreal, what it means in your career. Because, and what, where is representation different? Where is representation in classical music is already problematic for some communities, but in early music, it's different than in classical music. Asian representation in classical music is not underrepresented.
Right.
Neither are Jewish musicians
Mm-hmm.
underrepresented. In fact, they make up a large proportion, larger than the probably general population, and
Mm-hmm.
those are cultural reasons. So
Mm-hmm.
that goes in the positive direction in terms of representation. But in early music, for some reason, not the case. And then you can add another layer to it as being a woman, right? That's a whole
Mm-hmm.
other layer, but it's connected, and a lot of
Mm-hmm.
the same feelings. And sometimes that's where I felt so good talking to you, because it was validated by someone else
Yeah.
having the same feeling. That comes up for me a lot in terms of what did I feel because I'm a woman in this industry, I'm
Mm-hmm.
a woman in life. But just talking about the problems is already healthy and maybe a step toward change. Um,
Definitely.
and we
Definitely.
don't know. We'll see. We'll see what it leads to.
Yeah. The things that have become really sort of at the foreground of social discourse, of relevancy in terms of making sure there's equal representation, um, fear of sexual harassment, all of those things. I feel like classical music is sort of the last frontier. It's sort of the last industry that has tried to catch up, or tried to right some of the wrongs.
So tell me now about your passion project, because we were talking about your Thai identity, and
Mm-hmm.
you were telling me a little bit the other day, but it's so cool. But start from the beginning.
This project is a partnership with myself and a colleague of mine by the name of Benjamin Tardif, and he is a French Canadian. He's from Quebec City, and his story is that he went to McGill as an art major, but he spent a year abroad in Thailand, and during his time there, he discovered this type of dance, Kon, and he really just became completely enamored with it. And it was sort of, he had his calling, that this is this is what he wanted to do, and
He
he just
wasn't
wanted
trained as a
to.
dancer, or was he a dancer?
No,
No. Okay.
no, he wasn't. He's an art major, art history major, I should say. So that's probably what drew him to the genre to begin with. But he discovered this type of dance, and he just wanted to know more. I see it, very parallel to how each of us discovers early music. It's something that is based in history. You get a first taste, and for those that, for us, certainly, it really calls to you, and you can't get enough. So he decided to remain in Thailand, and he began formal training in this type of dance form, and went to university. He got a second master's degree in Kon interpretation, and has been living there, dances with his colleagues are from the National Theatre of Thailand. He's considered a professional Kon dancer, and is the only foreign professional Kon dancer. The title is Machanu, which is a character in the Ramayana, which is the Hindu epic story that has roots in India, but there's various interpretations all around Southeast Asia. So this particular character is a half monkey, half fish being. And
talking about from what era? Like mythological, like ancient?
14th century, 15th century. The story is very old. It might even be older than that. But in terms of the art form that we're focusing on, which is called Kon, it's a type of Thai mask dance that is very specifically used to interpret the Ramayana. So Kon dance is a type of theatrical dance, but is sort of a hybrid between various types of forms of martial arts and traditional folk dance. So, from our first conversation was all about this, our relationship to our professions and what we do. And it was really interesting, because I think right away we could see like this sort of mirror image, in terms of our experiences, him being, a foreigner in Thailand and working with his historical art form, and myself, being a minority, being a visible minority, and also working in this art form where I am a minority. And it was just an interesting conversation because we kept asking each other questions like, oh, well, do you know this about, Baroque music? And he's like, no. And he's asking me, do you know this about Thai culture and history? I'm like, nope. so it was just a really interesting exchange that I think ended up inspiring this project, which is all about making these cultural connections and, really finding a common thread, in like two art forms that don't necessarily have a lot in common, but can really, really complement and benefit each other if you dig deep, if you take the time to really explore the different layers.
The project that you've got.
So the project is it's a new choreography. It's a new interpretation of an old story based on this character Machanu, who is this half sort of hybrid character. And the reason why we were drawn to this particular character is because, again, it's sort of a reflection of our experiences where, this particular figure, he sort of grows up in a certain environment. In his case, he grew up in the water because he's half fish. And as he grew older, he kind of, through chance, he sort of figured out who his father was. His father being Hanuman, the monkey general, and he moved onto land and had to sort of learn how to function in a new environment. And so the very essence of this character was sort of very similar to what some of the experiences that Ben and I had. So we developed this story around him. It explores the backstory of this particular character through contemporary and traditional Khon dance, pairing it with music from the French Baroque era. And the reason why we established this connection was because we now know that Khon existed for a very, very long time. However, the first written evidence that we have of this particular form was by a French explorer during the time of Louis XIV. So at this time, this was in the end of the 17th century, the French were very much invested in exploring Asia to establish trade routes, also to colonize. One French traveler in particular journeyed to Thailand, which was known as Siam at the time. Mm-hmm. And he wrote a very, very detailed travel journal and had a very lengthy chapter on Thai art, music, and dance in particular. And so his description of Khon is the first description that we have.
So you had found some documentation that coincides with French Baroque era that you play.
Mm-hmm.
And you also mentioned that there was some documentation about some instruments that were brought, some European instruments that were brought to Thailand?
Yeah. So the interesting thing is because of the missionaries, there were a lot of Europeans that were based in Siam at the time, and there are records that they requested certain instruments to be brought over, such as harpsichords, lutes, perhaps violins.
So
history in itself.
Be dancing solo to you guys playing.
So the musicians will be recording and filming in Montreal, and the dancers will be filming in Thailand. So it will be Ben, but also with some of his colleagues from the National Theatre. Yeah. So I'm very, very excited about this. Yeah. I think it's, I get very excited, I'm especially excited during this development phase because things are starting to come together and the choreography is starting to take shape. And, Ben sends me these videos that he's been working on with the dancers, and to see like this type of Thai traditional dance accompanied by Ramo, for example, is actually really, for me personally, it's stunning because it's, in a way, it's like this clash of two worlds, two worlds colliding, and it's very special for me to see and hear, and I hope that other people will have the same feeling as well.
I'm sure. I'm sure it sounds fabulous. I mean, it sounds so interesting. I can't wait to see. It piqued my interest for sure. It's so nice to have a connection that's personal because you found it really like within your roots and your heart, and that's by it'll be wonderful just because you have that, and you're sharing that will already have won over audiences.
I hope so. I mean, it's one of those things too where it's a risk, right? Because you're sort of stepping outside of even the very sort of wide, box of early music where you already have a lot of freedom. But then in this case, you're really combining two things that probably didn't meet. This is a very hypothetical. And one of the reasons why I think it does work is because the roots of French Baroque music is in dance. So there is already that very strong rhythmic component where if you were to pair it with other types of dance, it already works in that sense. There's a functionality, that I think serves many types of dance well. But there's also, there's also because the Cohen aspect of this project is both traditional and contemporary.
It really works. And I think when the intention or the reason behind it makes sense, then it works.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It comes through. It does.
Yeah.
I have some questions for you. I was inspired by James Lipton, who was inspired by Bernard Pivot, who was inspired by Proust.
Okay.
So don't think too hard. Some of the questions are hard, but just go for it.
Okay.
What do you consider your greatest achievement?
Maybe my greatest achievement is making it this far in life with no regrets.
That's a nice one. Okay. What is your most treasured possession?
Oh, okay. For this, I have to go the music route and say my violin is my most treasured possession.
What is it that you most dislike?
I really dislike the texture of calamari.
Is classical music dead?
We are at the cusp of it being considered something too marginal or tangential to be relevant.
What is your greatest extravagance?
I think my greatest extravagance must be skincare products. I love just blowing hundreds of dollars on like face creams, and I don't know. I feel like if I didn't have that gravitation towards this luxury, I probably would have a lot more money.
Where would you like to live?
I'd love to live somewhere near the ocean and the mountains and the forest.
Vancouver. There it is.
Yes, that is my exactly. That is I've had this like dream to move out to Vancouver for almost 10 years now. So maybe one day. Yeah.
Okay. If you were to die and come back as a person or thing, what do you think it would be?
I would love to come back as a dolphin.
Okay. If heaven or hell exists, what composer would you meet and what would you say to them when introduced?
Jean-Marie Lefebvre, and ask him like what happened. Yeah, what happened on that day? What happened?
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure speaking with you. It was really an honor and so interesting. And I'll see you soon. But thank you so much for being on my show.
Thank you, Mika, for having me. It was really fun. Can we have one last cheers?
One last cheer.
Here we go. Cheers. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, Mika.